Good afternoon, and welcome to the Western Energy Markets Governing Body General Session Meeting. Please note that today's call is being recorded, and currently all of our attendee lines are in a listen-only mode. There will be opportunity for public comment throughout today's call, and we will give you instructions on how to enter the comment queue at that time. With that, I'd now like to formally begin today's call and turn it over to Chair Rob Konziolka. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Silas. Good afternoon and welcome to our March meeting. We thank all who are attending and for your interest in today's proceedings. Public awareness and perspectives are important. And as Silas just mentioned, there will be opportunities for public comments throughout the meeting, and we invite comments where appropriate. So let's get started, and I will turn the meeting over to Corporate Secretary Roger Collington for the roll call.
Thank you, Chair Konziolka, and we'll start with you, Chair Konziolka.
I am here.
Good thing. Vice Chair Wagner.
Here.
Member Campbell.
Here.
Member Decker.
Here.
And Member Prescott.
Here.
All present and accounted for, and we can turn it back to you, Chair Konziolka.
Thank you. Our first agenda item, as usual, is general public comment. This is the time to provide comments for some items that are not on the agenda. So at this point, Silas, if you would give the instructions on how to provide a public comment.
If you would like to speak under general public comment, you can please press the raise hand icon at the bottom center of your Zoom screen. If you are dialed in through our phone only line, you can press #2 on your telephone keypad to enter the comment queue. At this time, we have no comments in the queue.
All right, thank you. So let's move on to agenda item 2, and that is the decision on the governing body's February 11th general session meeting minutes. So Roger?
Yes, thank you, Chair Konziolka. Can we have a motion to approve the February 11th, 2025 general session meetings for the governing body?
So moved.
Second? Anyone?
John, I'll second it.
Thanks, John. And we'll take your votes. Chair Konziolka?
Aye.
Vice Chair Wagner? Member Campbell?
Aye.
Member Decker?
Aye.
And Member Prescott?
Aye.
Thank you, governing body. The motion is approved. And back to you, Chair Konziolka.
Thank you. Before going on to our next agenda item, I have a few remarks. I'd like to start with stating that to allow for better planning and scheduling, the governing body is committing to having future governing body general sessions start at 1 p.m. Pacific time. You will note today we were starting at 1:30. The governing body has noticed we have not had a consistent start time. So to be more respectful to the Bosser chair, the RIF chair, invited guests, staff, and attendees, we believe starting at a consistent time will be helpful in blocking time on calendars and knowing when to expect the meetings to start. That being said, those living in Arizona will still be subject to different start times every 6 months. In addition to our regular updates by the Bosser, RIF, and on policy initiatives, at today's meeting, we have a spotlight on FERC EDAM filings and issues raised by transmission rights and congestion in the EDAM footprint. The governing body does not have authority over EDAM participants' FERC filings related to the WEIM or EDAM, but we do have a role in protecting and promoting the energy markets. So we appreciate that PacifiCorp and Portland General Electric have offered to be here today to brief us on their status with EDAM filings and implementation. We're also fortunate that we have a staff presentation to address these issues along with current activities associated with this item. Much has been stated and reported on how transmission rights and congestion work in the hybrid EDAM and legacy OAT environment. The governing body places a high priority on ensuring there is clarity on complex topics such as congestion, along with clear communications on how it works. The governing body looks forward to having clearer understandings after these briefings. So with that, our next agenda item is item 3, CEO remarks. Mark Rothleader, the Senior Vice President and CEO of CAISO, is here to provide us with this update. Mark?
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chair Kanzioka and governing body members. I am here today to provide the CEO report on behalf of Elliot Manzer, who is on his way back from Washington, D.C., where he presented to the Energy Subcommittee to the Energy House Energy and Commerce Committee this morning. As 2025 gets underway, the CAISO staff, in collaboration with our EDAM committed partners, are focusing their efforts on the successful implementation of EDAM and onboarding PacifiCorp in spring 2026 and Portland in fall 2026. In January, PacifiCorp filed revisions to its previously proposed open access tariff for EDAM. Subsequently, comments were filed by several parties with the topic of congestion rent allocation as a clear theme centered on concerns regarding the ability to hedge congestion cost exposure associated with exercise of transmission rights, and how EDAM allocates congestion revenues to participating balancing areas, which are then sub-allocated to transmission customers. On March 7th, the CAISO filed an answer in the PacifiCorp docket, where we asserted our belief that the PacifiCorp tariff provisions for the sub-allocation of received congestion revenues are just and reasonable. On the question of how congestion revenues are allocated between EDAM balancing areas, particularly congestion revenues arising as a result of parallel flow in adjacent EDAM areas, the ISO committed to an expedited stakeholder initiative to further describe the FERC-approved EDAM design and consider potential transitional alternatives and associated trade-offs. On March 17th, the ISO published an issue paper and yesterday held the first stakeholder meeting on that topic. Separately, on February 20th, FERC approved the ISO's EDAM access charge, establishing how the ISO will allocate access charge revenue received from other participating balancing areas, as well how ISO will allocate access charges paid to other participating balancing areas. We are monitoring as BPA issued its day-ahead market policy direction, stating that BPA should select SPP's Markets Plus as its preferred choice, with final decision scheduled for May following a 30-day comment period. BPA has been a valued and long-standing partner for the ISO, having played an important role in making WEM a major success and for electricity customers across the West. We respect BPA's decision-making process and look forward to continuing to work together through its ongoing participation in the Western Energy Imbalance market. Our view is that BPA's final decision will have major impacts on reliability and affordability for electricity customers in the Northwest and across the West. And we encourage BPA to continue to evaluate and engage in the Pathways Initiative while governance reform legislation works its way through the California legislature. With regards to the legislation, we are pleased to see Bill SB 540 introduced in the California legislature on February 20th that would authorize establishment of an independent regional organization to govern the energy markets throughout the West. The bill is sponsored by Senator Josh Becker from Menlo Park, chair of the Senate Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Communications, and Senator Henry Stern from Los Angeles. On March 12th, Elliott took part in an informational hearing on the Pathways Initiative before Senator Becker's committee with Alice Reynolds, president of the California Public Utilities Commission, and Siva Gunda, vice chair of the California Energy Commission. If SB 540 passes and becomes law, and if the CAISO Board of Governors finds that certain requirements are met as required by the proposed legislation, the new regional organization would provide independent governance over the energy markets that are currently operated by the California ISO. The ISO would maintain its responsibility as balancing authority in California, and the state would retain control over public policies for California's Energy Planning, Resource Procurement, and Renewable Portfolio Standard. Switching to summer, which feels like it's a little bit summer already. Summer is a little bit more than 3 months away, and we are again focusing our annual summer readiness activities. Our RC West activity role is busy working with transmission operators and balancing authority areas in the West to coordinate all spring maintenance that typically gets done this time of year in advance of summer. As part of our summer readiness preparedness, we will be holding summer readiness roundtable and tabletop exercises with neighboring balancing areas and Western energy imbalance market entities across the West. We have found this coordination and preparation extremely helpful in navigating summer operational conditions. On February 24th, we completed some organizational restructuring as a restructuring of a portion of our grid operations and our infrastructure and operational planning teams to more distinctly define the roles, reporting structures, and physical work locations to better differentiate services we are providing to the California ISO balancing areas, and those services provided to entities throughout the West. These changes support our long-standing commitment to treating all market participants impartially while maintaining high-quality service and performing our responsibilities as the California's largest balancing area. Finally, I want to mention that Dr. Ben Hobbs, who has been on the MSC Market Surveillance Committee since 2002, will have his term ending on March 31st. Dr. Hobbs' expertise has been invaluable, but he has requested that any consideration of reappointment not exceed 1 year. As a result, we will be requesting a reappointment of Dr. Hobbs for 1 year in joint governing body and board of governors session tomorrow. That completes my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Let me see if the governing body members have any questions or comments. I don't see any. Mark, I just wanted to comment that I thought the Energy Matters blog that explained the reorganization was very helpful, and I'm glad that that was done. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
So we will now move on. And so no one thinks I'm messing up and making a mistake. We have a slight reorder in our agenda item. So our next agenda item is going to be what was posted as agenda item 5, and it's going to be the Regional Issues Forum update. With us to provide that update is the RIF chair, Meg McDowell, and Meg is a partner at Thompson & Colburn. So Meg, you're there, the floor is yours.
I am here. Good afternoon, Chair Kanzioka, Vice Chair Wagner, and members of the governing body. I have a brief update this afternoon regarding the Regional Issues Forum's recent activities. Planning for our April 9th meeting, which is scheduled to take place at PacifiCorp's offices in Portland in a hybrid meeting format, is essentially complete. Our agenda has been posted, and we're planning to cover 3 primary topics, including the RIF's annual policy initiatives catalog and roundtable discussion. We're having the first of a 2-part series on the topic of market seams, and that's a discussion that will be facilitated by 2 of our liaisons, Ali Mace and Vijay Satyal. They have a panel of speakers lined up, and that should be a very interesting conversation. Finally, we're also planning on providing an update at the April 9th meeting on the ongoing RIF enhancements initiative that I talked about briefly at my last update. In connection with the RIF enhancements initiative, just to recap, we're looking at potential updates to the role of the RIF within ISO stakeholder proceedings, and considering possible areas of expansion of the RIF's role. And we're doing that sort of in a way that is trying to align with some of where we saw the changes to the stakeholder process heading in the Step 2 final proposal from the West-wide Governance Pathways Initiative. So we'll be spending some time on April 9th talking about some ideas that the RIF has been putting together for how we may go about potentially enhancing the RIF's role and involvement. To that end, we are planning on publishing within the next 2 weeks a discussion paper written by the RIF liaisons in consultation with sector members that discusses some of these ideas. And our next steps following publication and discussion at the April 9th meeting will be to take some stakeholder comments on the ideas that we're putting forth. In addition to the April 9th meeting planning and our RIF enhancements activities, we have started planning for our next RIF meeting, which will take place in June on the 17th in the afternoon. Our meeting will also be in a hybrid format, and it's going to happen in Reno, Nevada. So we're looking forward to that. Our agenda hasn't been finalized yet, but I anticipate that we will have a follow-on discussion related to SEAMS, a follow-on discussion related to some of the RIF enhancements activities, and then probably at least one other topic or two. Beyond that, I just wanted to note that our annual preparations for the policy initiatives roundtable are sort of coming to a close as we look toward the April 9th discussion. The RIF liaisons have been conducting sector outreach and reviewing stakeholder submittals into the ISO's policy initiatives catalog and roadmap process. And we're working on synthesizing the input that we've received into a cohesive set of recommendations regarding prioritization of initiatives. With that, that concludes my update. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do the governing body members have any questions or comments for Meg? I'm seeing none. So Meg, as usual, very thorough and very much appreciated. And just so you know, I think you can count on really solid attendance by the governing body members at the RIF meeting in April next month. And we're looking forward to the work that RIF does. So thank you.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item is our old agenda item 3, which is now our agenda item 5 now, which was the old agenda item 4, which is an update on the body of state regulators. And just so you know that we have another change up here with us today for the update is the vice chair of the BOSSR, Commissioner John Hammond. Commissioner Hammond is a commissioner at the Idaho PUC. So John, if you're there, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. Gabe was otherwise detained today, so I am stuck in the office in the middle of a motion hearing on a big fight over a large customer contract with one of our IOUs. So I'm chained to my desk. But yeah, good afternoon, Chair Kanzioka and Vice Chair Wagner, and members of the Western Energy Markets Governing Body. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this update on recent activities of the body of state regulators. The BOSSR continues to monitor key initiatives at the ISO that impact the broader WEM and EDAM market functions. In particular, we've been focusing on various market mechanisms that fall under Price Formation Enhancements Initiative with a deep dive into fast start pricing. As noted in Chair Aguilera's February report to the governing body, we invited the DMM to our January meeting to share its perspective on fast start pricing. And at our March meeting, we invited FERC to present FERC's history of fast start pricing across the US electricity markets. BOSSR remains engaged in this initiative more broadly and looks forward to providing input as appropriate. At our March meeting, we also heard from PacifiCorp, the first entity to join EDAM, on their implementation process progress into this new market function. Relatedly, BOSSR also heard from the ISO on its plan to initiate the stakeholder process to address concerns regarding congestion revenue allocation that emerged from PacifiCorp's EDAM filing. And I understand that the ISO held a full-day stakeholder meeting yesterday to discuss this issue in detail. BOSSR will continue to monitor these developments to assess their implications for regulators. BOSSR also continues to monitor West-wide Governance Pathways Initiative. As you may know, there are 3 BOSSR members that participate in the Regional Organization Formation Committee work, Commissioner Darcy Houck, Commissioner Milt Dumit, and myself. We're acting as liaisons to that committee. There was a meeting yesterday. BOSSR continues to remain actively engaged in the next phase of the RO's development. BOSSR is also actively engaged in the nominating committee process underway and looks forward to helping identify the new governing body members. I'm also the member on the nominating committee, and we are that group is working hard. I can tell you, it's a new process for me, a new experience, and I'm loving the opportunity to participate. Looking ahead, we have our in-person meeting next Wednesday at April 2nd, or on April 2nd in La Jolla, California, in conjunction with the CREPC YRAB meeting. For those who are able to attend, I look forward to seeing you there. I've already had exchanged some emails with folks, so I look forward to seeing you there and meeting. And as an aside, just generally speaking, the West, as everyone knows, is going like gangbusters. The growth in load and demand, at least for us, when we were in a position not long ago, being capacity sufficient to being behind the 8 ball, so to speak. We're at an important time in our country in the West where these market functions will play a key role in addressing the needs of customers at fair, just, and reasonable rates, and will be a big part of the argument that's taking place here today in front of our commission about a large special contract and how that load will be served. So this concludes my report today, and on behalf of the body of state regulators, thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions from the government body or anyone else if there are any. Thank you.
Mr. Hammond, thank you for that update. And I'm going to check with the governing body members. Any questions or comments for the commissioner? Apparently none. So, we can see that you're doing a lot of great work and there's a lot of activity. And I might add, I think that if that background is where you're chained to, then you're in a position.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, that's the, if anybody ever has been there, it's called the Route of Hiawatha. It's a rail trail up in northern Idaho and Montana that runs along a rail trail or a former railroad bed that goes through, I think, 8 to 9 train tunnels, one of them being about 1.75 miles in the pitch black. And then it goes over large train trestles that are about 100 feet off the ground. So it's a spectacular part of the country. It's near Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. If you ever go up there and you ride bikes, highly recommend it. So
you have sold me. I was up there in that area last year, but I did not know about this. So now I know that I need to adjust the next time I am there.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. So I highly encourage that activity. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. So we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is agenda item 6. And this is our FERC filing updates implementing the EDAM. And to introduce this topic, we have the Vice President of Market Design and Analysis for CAISO, Anna McKenna. So Anna.
Good afternoon, Chair Kanzioka, governing body members. I am just going to give you a brief introduction to the next 2 speakers. They will be sharing with you the update on the tariff filings that they're currently undertaking to be ready to participate in EDAM in 2026. So first will be for PacifiCorp will be Mike Wilding, Vice President of Energy Supply Management. And following Mike, we'll have Kalia Savage, the Principal Transmission and Market Policy Analyst, providing us an update on their soon to be filed OAT changes in support of EDAM. So with that, I will ask Mike to provide us his first briefing.
Yeah, hello. Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here. You know, I will also put in a plug for the Hiawatha Trail. I took my kids. It's an easy bike ride. You don't even have to be a bike rider. So, but it's beautiful country and a blast, a lot of fun. But that's not what you asked me here to talk to you about. So I want to give you an update on where we are with our tariff filing. As you are well aware, we made a filing, and maybe just kind of give you a little bit of history on that. After you know, the CAISO's filing was approved, we kicked off a stakeholder process. And at the end of 2024, I think in November, if I remember right, we made a filing that at FERC, and before comments were received in that filing, we got a lot of feedback from our transmission customers, specifically around congestion allocation. And what we had done was we had proposed that we would the revenue that PacifiCorp received from the market, the congestion revenue, we would allocate that back to transmission customers based on measured demand. The feedback that we got was that was, you know, not adequate, that didn't provide our transmission customers with, you know, sufficient ability to hedge congestion. And so as we continue to listen to our transmission customers and also work with the CAISO, we determined that the CAISO would have more information for us, that we would be able to, you know, return that congestion revenue on using a more precise method. So at the beginning of 2025 in February, what we did was we pulled our initial tariff filing and we filed a new tariff that implemented a new allocation, or a different allocation methodology for the congestion revenues that PacifiCorp receives. What we did was we first, if a transmission customer provides a balanced self-schedule before the day-ahead market runs, we would first reverse that congestion and return the congestion to that customer. And then any remaining congestion in a second step would be allocated on measured demand less the balanced self-schedules that already had their transmission or their congestion reversed. As we continue to work with customers, we got positive feedback on that. However, one thing that perhaps certain entities did not understand as part of the CAISO design that was approved at FERC was that you know, congestion would be paid by the market or allocated by the market based on where the binding constraint occurred. So what this meant was if the binding constraint was in CAISO and it had a cross impact in PacifiCorp's territory in either one of our BAs, that congestion revenue would be returned to the CAISO BA, and then vice versa. If there was a binding constraint in PacifiCorp that caused congestion pricing on CAISO system, you know, just when it's just the two of us, that congestion revenue would be returned to PacifiCorp. And we were pretty clear and transparent about that's how it worked, and you know, that we could only return the congestion revenue that we received as an EDAM entity to our transmission customers. Well, once we received feedback, it was very apparent that perhaps entities didn't understand the market design or didn't quite understand how that would work. And we received a significant amount of comments in our tariff around that EDAM market design and how that left transmission customers without the ability to fully hedge their congestion exposure on our system, because there would be some congestion originating from a constraint in another BA that would manifest itself in the pricing in PacifiCorp and in the PacifiCorp BAs. So that was perhaps the I don't know, single largest area where we received comments and protests on our tariff. The other two areas were also concerning transmission. I'll say the other one was on the ability to carve transmission out of the market. And I'll go back to the congestion piece in just a minute, but to carve transmission out of the market or use the ETC TOR treatment, which essentially, treats that congestion as though, or not congestion, transmission as though it's not in the market, and therefore not when they would not pay any congestion charges either. The CAISO tariff said that was up to the transmission service provider to allow carve-outs as needed or as it deemed appropriate. Our tariff said that legacy transmission customers, so transmission customers with contracts predating OAT, that they would be eligible for the carve-out provision, the ETC TOR, and that any carve-outs beyond legacy customers would be a very limited basis, typically would be for reliability purposes only. So we received a lot of comments and protests around that as well, where entities asked FERC to essentially let the customer decide whether or not they want to carve their transmission rights out of the market, and not the TSP as was approved in the CAISO tariff. And then the other one with transmission was concerning intraday schedules and the firmness of schedule changes for OAT customers and how that interacts with RAP and just firm transmission customers. We did receive a couple of other comments, but I think that was the bulk of kind of the protest. We did receive some small comments around our resource efficiency evaluation, where we are essentially taking the CAISO resource efficiency evaluation that or the EDAM one that CAISO applies to each EDAM entity or at the BA level, and we are pushing those requirements down to the load serving entity so that each load serving entity is responsible to be resource efficient within the Pacific Corp BAs. So we did receive some comments there. And we also received some feedback on our stakeholder process. So, I think earlier this month, it feels like it's been longer, but it's only been 14 days when I look down at the date. So on March 11th, we filed our response comments to those entities. One of the and we also coordinated and discussed with the CAISO as we received specifically the comments around congestion and around the market design. We really feel like we basically did everything that we could with coming up with the most precise allocation method we could for the congestion revenues that Pacific Corp receives. And the CAISO also filed response comments that essentially said the same thing, that all we can do is allocate the revenues that we receive. And if we don't receive those revenues, we shouldn't be required to pass those back to customers or create a subsidy between two groups of customers. And so both us and the CAISO, we defended the EDAM market design, reminded FERC that this is what they had approved, and that there are reasons behind the market design, namely that where the constraint binds, that BA typically has to deal with that constraint through redispatch, and that's why it was appropriate for them to receive the cost. However, the CAISO in their comments pointed out that it was very apparent that perhaps that not the entire EDAM community and transmission customers on PAC systems understood that that's how the market would work, and that perhaps there should be some sort of transitionary method so that we don't move to this method or just make a wholesale change right away. And so the CAISO committed to doing a expeditious stakeholder process to to see if there was something that could be done and a very small change that could be made to address the concerns that we saw come up in our tariff filing. But there was no reason to hold our tariff up because our allocation method just deals with the dollars that we receive. So we also made the same argument that we appreciated the CAISO taking this up, but regardless of the amount of dollars we receive, we will allocate them the same way that we have in our tariff right now. So our tariff the FERC can be confident in approving our tariff. We also did commit to FERC as kind of following on the CAISO's commitment that they would report back to FERC either that no change to the market was necessary or with a tariff filing to effectuate any changes to the congestion design. And we committed that we would not join the market until that happens. And we expect that to happen, like I said, expeditiously, perhaps within the next couple of months, and not to put the go live date of May of 2026 at risk. So that's why we made that commitment. So just maybe a little bit of a side note, as Commissioner Hammond represented and discussed, that first stakeholder meeting was held yesterday. I think a lot of good progress was made to that point, and there is an issue paper out there. It's essentially, instead of the congestion revenues going to the BA where the constraint binds, they would go to the BA where those congestion prices were incurred and paid. So it's a fairly simple change in the settlement process. It doesn't change the market design or the market solution. It only changes the settlements on the back end. And so that's something we would definitely be supportive of to ensure that EDAM stays on track. We're anxious to stand up EDAM, start realizing those savings and benefits for our customers. So we're very optimistic based on yesterday's stakeholder meeting and even side conversations that we're having in the hallway, that I think this is a good solution that the EDAM community is going to get behind and be supportive of. So then the other items that we addressed in our FERC response was the carve out issue. We urged FERC that we are complying with the EDAM tariff that they have already approved, kind of as I mentioned earlier, and also that one of the reasons, or one of the big reasons why we saw so many comments on carve outs were certain entities wanting to be able to use transmission rights across PacifiCorp's system in kind of the manner that they deem appropriate, which includes donating those or contributing those to another market, namely Markets Plus. What we said to FERC is there will be a time and a place to have that conversation, and that those themes discussions will be important, and we will need to have those. And PacifiCorp, is invested and will be, we'll act in good faith to ensure that we have the best seams agreements that we can, that will benefit both markets and customers across the West. But predetermining or prejudging this carve out provision right now is not the same as being able to take those rights to contribute them to another market. That is a much larger discussion that needs to take place between the BAs, the TSP, the transmission customer, and also the two market operators. And then we also addressed the intraday schedule changes. We addressed the difference between the scheduling priority within the market, the provisions that we have in our tariff to identify when and which transmission schedules are being relied on for resource adequacy purposes, and how those can, obtain a higher scheduling priority in the market per the CAISO tariff. But then we also explained the difference between the scheduling priority in the market versus the curtailment priority in a reliability event or a transmission event where we do have to curtail schedules. And we are not changing the curtailment priority. That remained untouched. And so it is really just about giving that correct information to the market operator, which we feel like we've done, and been able to give the CAISO all the information needs to provide the correct scheduling opportunities. And then if it gets to the point and we are in an event where we do have to curtail transmission schedules or transmission flows, we will do that per our existing priorities that are already in place. So no changes to the curtailment priorities. And then we also addressed the other comments that were made. Those were, like I said, much less volume. In those areas, we did make some adjustments to the resource sufficiency evaluation, like the de minimis charge, instead of it being 10%, it's 1 megawatt, or it's 1 megawatt or 10%, whichever is greater, and a few small changes like that. But that's essentially where we are. We did receive an answer to our answer from BPA. We'll continue to monitor that and see if more answers to our answers come in, and if we need to respond to those, we will. But we'll be evaluating those. We did ask for an order by May 26th. So, we got about 2 months from tomorrow. And so I think that's my update on the tariff. Happy to answer any questions or talk about any other implementation stuff if you're interested, but happy to answer any questions.
Mike, thank you. Let me ask you, if you can stay, and I will hold all the questions and comments at the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So Anna, you can proceed.
Thank you. So next, I'm sorry, I can't see the slides, the screens, but I believe next we have Kalia ready to go to provide her update.
Yeah, can someone confirm you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. I just can't see you, Kalia, but I believe you are there.
Oh, great. I'll just be a voice. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Kalia Savage at Portland General Electric. I've been leading our tariff revision process over the course of almost a year now. I must say I have to show appreciation to Pacific Corp for going first and also providing the first update. Means I don't have to provide nearly as much detail on the market design since our tariffs are largely aligned. So thank you, Mike, for a great update. But like I said, Pacific Corp has been a few months ahead of us in our tariff revision process. And I think folks will find that our filing will be a reflection of their filed revisions that Pacific Corp made to their OAT, along with some minor changes. And that's really just based on the difference in the way that PGE settles with our transmission customers, and that we have a different demographic of transmission customers. And so largely, I would say that our tariffs are very much aligned. Probably one of the bigger policy issues that we see in our tariff is, like Mike highlighted, around how we effectuate the EDAM RSE. So like Mike noted, the EDAM RSE is really between inter-BAAs to make sure that BAAs are not leaning on each other. PGE is in a unique situation where we have observed that even in real times, we see load serving entities leaning on each other. And so that's why PGE is also supportive of having a load serving entity level resource sufficiency evaluation to help ensure that our load serving entities don't lean on each other, whether or not the BAA passes or fails the RSE. There's still a cost for underscheduling or overscheduling to our customers. So that's a big policy decision that PGE kind of made and really tried to focus a lot of our our stakeholder process on educating our customers on that to try to get feedback. But I would say we've been actively engaged with our regional stakeholders and policymakers to kind of align on EDAM policies. And I'll kind of highlight that in our update to kind of give you a flavor of what a following potential EDAM entity stakeholder process kind of looks like as we went through and revised our tariff. So we really tracked Pacific Corp's stakeholder process as it started back in June, and really watched to see, you know, what were their transmission customers saying? What was their engagement like? What were issues raised? And all of the posted drafts that Pacific Corp posted to their OASIS, we took into account as we revised and looked at our own tariff, and then also looked to the CAISO's tariff, obviously, as well. But it was a really good pulse check for us to be able to better understand what were the types of issues coming up and how might we think about that and consider that for our own tariff revision process. We also met between both PGE and Pacific Corp's implementation teams to better understand and inform some of the decision making that we were making in regards to revising our OAT. And similarly, we reached out to some utilities who are considering EDAM, who also are going to be similarly situated. There were some issues that we wanted feedback on and thought that that made sense. And that's very similar to, I would say, how entities engaged in the WEM process as we were implementing the WEM. We kind of see each of the tariffs very similarly as making updates and polishing and trying to get towards a pro forma tariff where we all have the same tariff for the most part. And although we are very close to Pacific Corp and their filing, so we didn't make that many changes by any means, because we will have to, of course, have to advocate for those to FERC, but we did take that into consideration, and we did engage with Pacific Corp to kind of help align on issues where we thought, oh, maybe this one was missing, or maybe we interpreted this CAISO requirement differently. It was very helpful to kind of get different perspectives from a BAA transmission provider perspective. But then also, as we went into our own transmission customer engagement process, which we started back in October, just kind of wrapped up in February, it was really helpful to kind of bring that transmission provider lens and kind of the different feedback we got, but then to get from our transmission customers issues that they saw, feedback and considerations that we should take in was also really beneficial, and I think helped really round out what we are hoping to file with FERC. In addition, and lastly, I would be remiss not to note that we really appreciated CAISO staff really in supporting, making themselves available to talk through all sorts of things like transmission scenarios and any pressing issues that we had to help PGE better understand the EDAM design. You know, PGE was involved throughout the stakeholder process when EDAM was being designed through working groups. And although I think we all came out and were like, yes, we understand the EDAM design, well, we think about it completely differently now that we have to implement the thing. And so there was a lot of questions and a lot of kind of looking at the design and better understanding from not just a policy level, but an implementation level. And so I really appreciate that the CAISO always being able to kind of support, make time for us, especially as some of the information that we learned from the CAISO really did influence some of the way that we wrote our tariff language and is going to influence the way that we implement the design as well. And for example, as Mike noted on the congestion stakeholder process, we're really encouraged by the CAISO's responsiveness in PAC's EDAM docket to FERC to expedite that process and relook at the congestion allocation in EDAM. I think this shows a willingness for change and consider concerns from a wide variety of stakeholders. And also, as governance is such an important key element, I think this just shows how important that is and how it works here at CAISO. So thank you to the CAISO staff for being responsive, making yourselves available, and really helping us through and supporting us through this implementation process. And we're also I encourage the CAISO to kind of continue and keep that open communication. with not just us, but other regional partners to kind of address any EDAM related challenges to help optimize that market design. Because as you know, we go through the implementation process, there are things that are going to come up, and we're already seeing that as well. And so we're, again, really appreciative for CAISO's support through this process so far. So with that said, you're probably all wondering, well, PGE, that sounds all great. When are you going to file? So I'm happy to say that after a 10-month process, no one is more relieved than I am to announce that we anticipate filing with FERC this week. So stay tuned. That is going to be happening. I should say my lawyers stress that I use the word anticipate because, of course, anything can happen, best laid plans, but that is our plan so far. And I just want to conclude with everyone here that our revision of our ode is really a reaffirming of PGE's commitment to EDAM and the continued importance of collaboration with CAISO to ensure a seamless transition into this new market structure. And I really thank CAISO again for their ongoing support and engagement throughout this process. And I'm happy to answer any questions as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those remarks. So I'm now going to open this up to the governing body members for questions and comments. And Anita.
Well, I want to thank Mike and Kalia both for making themselves available to provide this information to the governing body. I think they are first, PAC being first. I'd say Portland General is certainly a fast follower, and it's just nice to hear that there's collaboration. I recognize there's been some bumps in the road, as we've heard from stakeholders, but I think the important thing here is the intent. And the intent is to end up with a strong market at the end of the day for everyone that's participating. And I think that intent really goes a long way to build confidence, and it should build confidence with the market. So we've been here before starting something up. There will be a lot of changes along the way, but I really appreciate the kind of foot forward that I'm hearing from, absolutely the foot forward that I'm hearing from Kaya. So just thank you guys for the work you're doing. And I appreciate hearing the kudos to the CalISO staff, because sometimes we wonder, how are they doing? And, you know, we think they're doing well, and it's really nice to hear that from you as well.
Thank you, Anita. John, please go ahead.
Here, I just wanted to add my thanks as well. You know, just looking back when the energy imbalance market, we were seated as the governing body back in July of 2016. And it was interesting to watch how the participants that went forward first, PAC and others, you know, started reaping all the benefits of the market. And people started looking across the fence going, gee, that would be really maybe something we'd be interested in. So I kind of see that thing applying here. You guys are the trailblazers. Yeah, you know, things are not going to go smoothly, but as Anita said, the intent is there. And I think people will notice this, take notice, and everybody's going to make improvements as we go forward, and the market's going to expand, probably beyond our wildest expectations, in my view. So anyway, thanks for being the trailblazers on this, and we're behind you 100%.
Thank you, John. Mike and Kelly, I just really have one question to both of you, and it's the same question. If you could just provide a brief update on just the EDAM implementation. It's hard to believe that we are getting close, and then I know the next year is going to go by very, very fast for your staff. And I just, if you give us a feeling for where things are and how things are going.
Yeah, you're right. It is going to go by fast, and you know, we have a countdown clock. And it just keeps getting, as countdown clocks do, it just keeps counting down. Yeah, I think it's going really well. We're making really good progress with all of our, you know, IT updates. As you know, this is a massive IT project. And we will start connectivity testing on May 1. I will say most everything that we have that we will do connectivity testing for is already connected to the CAISO, so we expect that to kind of go off without any problems. We might have one or two new applications from the same vendor that have to connect to the CAISO, but again, from same vendors that we're already using. So expect that to be successful. The other thing, you know, the work is continuing to progress with all the upgrades that we have to do. Really, again, we appreciate the collaboration from the CAISO and their team and the partners from our vendors as well to get ready to bring everything together. I'll say we've also kicked off the training. So it's, pretty intense, kind of train the trainer for the first part. So we've got a schedule over the next month to 6 weeks where the different departments, settlements and finance and transmission and the front office and the grid operations, all are sending folks and we're doing, train the trainer type of exercises, and then also working with the guys. So we appreciate their ability to share, trainings with us that we can then, load into our learning management system and push out to impacted employees. So really appreciate, again, that collaboration. And then I'll say the other thing that we've done, and since we last talked, is our transmission group is started to kind of launch a formal process to support implementation of the transmission customers. So that's going on as we speak. They've also started to publish initial drafts of business practice manuals that will, implement the tariff that we have on file. So, if you want to hear more about that, we could definitely get, someone from our transmission group to give an update next time. But things are going well. They're chugging along, and we continue to march forward.
Thank you. Kalia, if you have any remarks that you could provide?
Yeah, I can give short remarks as I have been so focused on the tariff. I haven't done a lot else, but if there is interest from PGE providing an implementation update at the next meeting, I can definitely make sure that our project manager is there to provide that. But I would say we are very much in kind of the data gathering mode. So with each one of our tracks, so much of it is just gathering what is our current business requirements, identifying what needs to change, doing a lot of scenarios, like I noted earlier in my comments, and working a lot with the CAISO to really understand how does transmission work in the EDAM? How do our rights work? I would say that work through tracks 3 and 4 has been really important to better help us understand how the market design works. What does it look like? So then we can figure out, okay, how does that lead into business practices? How does that lead into the way that we interface with our transmission customers based on the different activities that our customers can utilize? It's kind of branched out a lot of different things in the way that we're understanding. So I would say if I could put like a theme on where we are right now, it's kind of forming. We just put together our whole implementation team, I want to say, back in the January timeframe. And so a lot of what we've been focusing on in this first quarter is really just putting together project plans, really figuring out and finalizing a gap analysis on our business to really just develop a plan for us over the course of the next year and a half, which, agreed, is going to be very short. It already feels like we don't have enough time. So we're working very fast and furiously, which is why we're really appreciative of the CAISO being able to kind of match our level of urgency. So thank you.
Kalia, Mike, Kalia, if you could just wait just a little bit longer, I want to see if there's any public comments. So, Silas, if we could go and see if there are anyone wishing to make public comments on this agenda item.
If you would like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or if you are dialed in through our phone only line, you can press #2 on your telephone keypad. At this time, I'm not seeing any hands up in the queue.
Okay. So, Mike, Kalia, thank you so much for being with us today, and echoing what Anita and John said. We appreciate your time, and it is very helpful, and we believe this is very instructive towards ensuring that we see the market does what we expect it to do and have exceptional performance. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks for
you.
having us.
Excellent. So now let's move on to agenda item 7, which is a briefing on key policy initiative with the EDAM congestion revenue allocation. And once again, to introduce this topic is the Vice President of CAISO, Anna McKenna.
Thank you, Chair Kanzioka. I have the pleasure of introducing this next topic, but before I do that, I wanted to thank Commissioner Hammond for pointing out that great trail. We've already looked it up and we're all planning to one day visit it. So very exciting. And thank you to Kalia and Mike for informing us as to how they're forging trails within their tariffs. So thank you for everybody's comments on that. I really appreciate all the work that's being done there. On our end, we have for some time now, I've been providing you some updates on what is going on in policy development, stakeholder processes, what are the hot topics, and we've been providing some updates. And I wanted to note that now we're taking a bit of a different approach and style, where we'll be coming to you and providing kind of a spotlight moment, as you mentioned earlier, on an item that is taking significant more time, if you wish, in the stakeholder process and has a little bit more focus and perhaps sometimes controversy, or may just be interesting. On this, for this month's or for this meeting's item, of course, we thought it would be appropriate to put a spotlight on this new initiative that we have just started to address concerns raised regarding the congestion revenue allocation approach under EDAM. We will have a public comment on this, so folks can line up to comment on it. But I just wanted to note as well that we had a really well-attended stakeholder meeting yesterday. It was lots of good conversation, good dialogue. I think also good learnings on all ends. And so I think it was really helpful to get that initiative going. So we don't have too much yet in terms of comments from participants on this initiative, but I anticipate that as the written comments start coming in, you'll see quite robust a record given the great participation we're seeing already. So with that, I'm going to ask that Milos Bosnak, our regional market sector manager, to provide us an update. And Milos has been leading the EDAM policy design effort, and so you're familiar with him. And yes, we put him to lead this one as well. So thank you, Milos. And with that, I will turn it over to him.
Thank you, Anna, and good afternoon, Chair Konziolka, Vice Chair Wagner, governing body members. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you a briefing on the new initiative, the Extended Day Ahead Market Congestion Revenue Allocation Initiative, which, as you've heard, is a new and expedited initiative that we've launched earlier this month. We go to the next slide. Just a bit of context, and you've heard some of this already in the prior presentations, but earlier this year in January, Pacificor filed their open access tariff revisions for approval with FERC, implementing the EDAM design and the FERC-approved tariff. Pacificor is the first entity to revise their out, as they did in 2014 with the launch of the EIM, but as you heard as well, Portland General is close behind and getting ready to file their tariff as well. Within the FERC proceeding that associated with the Pacificor filing, commenters expressed concern with the EDAM design, in particular for congestion revenue allocation and how congestion revenues are allocated and distributed by the market operator among the different participating EDAM entities. Those commenters expressed that effectively the exercise of OAT transmission rights may expose them to congestion costs in the EDAM that they may not otherwise be exposed to today, and thus they express concern that the EDAM design, based on how the market operator allocates and distributes the congestion revenues accrued across the footprint, that the market design may not allocate sufficient congestion revenues to the EDAM entity, to Pacificor, for example, to be able to offset that congestion cost exposure that those exercising the transmission rights may potentially be exposed to. And in particular, this is related to how congestion revenues that are accrued are allocated associated with parallel flow effects on adjoining systems in the EDAM footprint. As noted earlier in our response to FERC comments in the FERC proceeding, we indicated that we would launch this expedited initiative in light of the amount of stakeholder comment on this topic and concern about the allocation mechanism, that we will launch this targeted initiative to evaluate and consider the existing design and the context and how it works, but also potentially evaluate alternate designs as well. If we go to the next slide. So I want to spend just a little bit of time on this slide to kind of ground you on the current structure of the EDAM design to revenue, congestion revenue allocation. As a starting point, when an entity joins EDAM, the full transmission system and the full transmission capability is modeled in our market, becomes available for optimization. And as part of that modeling process, we also model transmission constraints on that particular system within the balancing area. And as part of that modeling as well, of modeling of generation, loads, resources, and the establishment of locational marginal prices across that balancing area that's now joined the EDAM, we also tie those constraints to the different locations to understand better what's the effect of a constraint on a particular location and the congestion impact on the congestion component of the locational marginal price. Load pays the locational marginal prices of the LMPs that include a congestion component at that particular location, and then generators are paid the LMP at their locations that are reflective of the congestion impacting that particular location. In simplest terms, the difference between those locational marginal prices at the generator and at the load location, for example, driven by congestion impacts and how the congestion and constraints may affect those locations, that's the congestion revenue. And the market operator stays revenue neutral and has to suballocate those congestion revenues among the EDAM balancing areas and distribute them among them. And then the EDAM entity establishes under their tariff how they're going to further allocate those received revenues amongst their transmission customers. Under the current EDAM design, the congestion revenues are allocated to the balancing area in which the transmission constraint is located. This is the FERC-approved design and is also the design that's in effect today in the EIM and has been in effect for the last decade. A transmission constraint in a balancing area, due to the nature of the interconnected system and the interconnected market footprint, a transmission constraint in one balancing area can have an effect on the congestion price at a pricing location at the LMP within the balancing area, as well as with the neighboring balancing areas potentially, based on the effect of that constraint on those locations. And that's what we call parallel flows, when effectively energy flows across the path of least resistance and across an interconnected system. A constraint could have a pricing effect on generator and load locations in the neighboring balancing area. And because of that effect, there could be congestion revenues that arise within the balancing area where the constraint is located, but there could also be congestion revenues that arise in the neighboring balancing area as a result of that constraint, because that constraint impacts the prices in the neighboring balancing area. And in this graphic, if a transmission constraint is located in the Pacific-Core balancing area, again, due to the nature of the interconnected transmission system and the parallel flow effects, that constraint could have an effect and an impact on pricing locations at generators or at load locations within the CAISO or in the adjoining balancing area, and vice versa. If the constraint is in the CAISO, it could have a similar effect in the Pacific-Core balancing area. And the congestion revenue then that results from that price difference within each balancing area under the EDAM design would be allocated to the balancing area where the constraint is located. So in this example, if the constraint is in Pacific-Core, any congestion revenues that result as a result of that constraint, based on the impact of that constraint on different prices across the footprint, those congestion revenues would be allocated to Pacificor because that's where the constraint is located. They bear the burden associated with managing that constraint and the redispatch that may result associated with having to manage the congestion effects of that constraint within their balancing area. That's the current design that's in effect and has been approved by FERC and is in effect in the EIM. Since folks noted this already in some of the prior presentations, we did publish an issue paper on this topic. We published these slides ahead of the issue paper, but I can allude to a little bit what we've introduced in the issue paper. I think we've acknowledged this potential concern and how congestion revenues are allocated, and that a transmission customer that may be exercising their transmission rights in the neighboring balancing area that's affected by that constraint, the congestion revenue would not necessarily go back to that balancing area, so they may not be able to provide as full of a congestion hedge as transmission customers may want. And so within the initiative that we just launched in the issue paper that we published and the stakeholder meeting that we held yesterday, aside from consideration of the existing design, we introduced an alternative approach for consideration, a transitional alternative, where effectively the congestion revenues that accrue in the balancing area as a result of parallel flows would remain with the balancing area where they accrued. It would not go back to the balancing area where the constraint is located. And so under that alternate approach, if you're looking at this example, the congestion revenues that accrue within the CAISO as a result of the constraint within Pacificor would remain with the CAISO. And similarly, if the constraint were in the CAISO, but there were parallel flow congestion revenues in Pacificor, Pacificor would retain those parallel flow congestion revenues. And what that means is that, in effect, the congestion revenues stay with the balancing area where they accrue, irrespective of the location of the constraint. And that's the alternative that we've introduced that we think goes a long way in addressing some of the concerns that were expressed and enables the balancing area then to be able to provide a greater congestion hedge to those customers that may be exercising their transmission rights. If we go to the next slide. As we noted, we launched this initiative earlier this month. It's an expedited initiative that has a fairly focused scope to help us move it forward fairly quickly and address the issues that we've heard in those comments. But that initiative is fairly focused on how are those congestion revenues with parallel flows allocated? To what balancing area should they be allocated in the EDAM? And as I noted, under the design today, those parallel flow congestion revenues flow to the entity where the constraint is located. Under the alternate design that we introduced for consideration, those congestion revenues would stay with the balancing area where they're collected, enabling potentially the ability to provide a greater congestion hedge. And through this initiative, we sought to establish a better understanding or a further understanding of the current FERC-approved design, and that's in effect in the EIM, but then also explore alternatives that would help address some of the concerns that we've heard within the Pacificor proceeding associated with that market operator allocation and distribution of congestion revenues. We go to the next slide. So to give you a sense a bit of the milestones and the expedited nature of the initiative, as noted earlier, we published a issue paper on March 17th, and then we held a first stakeholder meeting, all-day stakeholder meeting yesterday on March 24th to walk through the issue paper. We walked through a number of examples, and hopefully we're able to respond to a lot of the questions that stakeholders had, and we took important feedback as well. The stakeholder comments on the issue paper are due next week on Monday, April 7th, and those comments then will help us inform development of a proposal that moves us now from the issue paper where we introduced an alternative for consideration. Based on that feedback, we will then identify the specific proposal that we want to put forward and take stakeholder feedback as well. We expect to have multiple stakeholder workshops in April after we receive those comments and we publish our proposal. And then we expect to also publish a final proposal in the first week of May, but to the extent that, depending on the comments that we receive, we may be able to move a bit quicker to the extent that stakeholders are coalescing around a particular approach and that alternative that we've identified for vetting. We would target presentation to a joint session of the Board of Governors and the Western Energy Markets governing body in May at the joint general session. But again, to the extent that something can be done earlier based on stakeholder feedback, we're open to that as well. So I think that is the last slide. Let me pause here maybe for questions. I know I shared a lot of information, but happy to take any questions.
Do the governing body members have any questions or comments for Milos? Okay. Oh, Andy, please.
Thank you, Chair Konziolka. Thank you, Milos, for this presentation. It's very helpful to hear you walk through some of the fundamental issues that are in play here, and I'm very much eager to hear from stakeholders through this process. It's one of the roles I play in the governing body is I'm liaison to the market expert, and it so happens Susan Pope, our market expert, has considerable expertise very specifically in the area of congestion in organized markets and some of the issues that have come up across the country as markets have transitioned from OAT framework to organized markets. So we're going to be very much looking forward to hearing from her to help advise the governing body through this process. And we just wanted to share, we're beginning to work on finding a time where we can have her provide a presentation at a kind of general session, maybe a general special general session, kind of sharing her thoughts on some of the fundamental issues that are important when we think about congestion revenues. So please keep your eyes out for that being scheduled. And then certainly if a proposal comes into fruition, then we'd also would be looking to her to provide an opinion on that. And of course, these things would be public, so others would also be able to benefit from her expertise. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Sounds good. We welcome that. That sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Anita.
So I want to say thank you for the presentation. I got to see it yesterday as well. So just it keeps reinforcing kind of what the issues are and the work that's being done here. So I really appreciate having this before us today. As Andy said, we're looking at doing something in terms of a special meeting to make sure that I think our stakeholders feel that we're pretty well on this issue as well and watching it. So I just want to say thank you and nice job.
Thank you. That sounds great. Thank you.
Milos, I must wonder how many times you've gone through this this topic and this explanation and the education. But I do think that even though you feel like you've probably done it 100 times and maybe more, because it is so complex and it is so challenging to get your arms around all of this. And as we can see from the filings, there are some different perspectives, and what's being done here in the West for EDAM is new and unique, and this is setting new breaking new territory. So very helpful, very instructive, and greatly appreciated. And if you're ready, then I'll go to public comments.
That sounds good. Thank you.
All right, great. Silas, if we can see if there are any individuals who would like to make public comments at this point.
If you would like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or #2 if you are dialed in through the phone line. At this time, I'm not seeing any hands up. Oh, I'm sorry. We just had one hand up go up in the queue. Stephen, you've been sent a prompt to unmute yourself. You can go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, people. This is Steve Boyning, appearing on my own behalf at this moment. I just wanted to thank the CAISO staff for this discussion, because I think the initial proposal probably would have been inappropriate with respect to the allocation of congestion revenues collected by the market. I think that this still has some of the drawbacks of a two-step administrative process where the market operator does not have a relationship directly with the transmission customers, but that's an evil that we all will live with as long as the transmission provider's oaths are the mechanism for the sale of transmission service. But a point that was not part of the discussion yesterday, but that I think is a material consideration to be aware of in this dialogue, is with respect to the assumptions that are made in the day-ahead market clearing on the contribution of loop flow from generation and load outside the market footprint. And the reason I think it's worth mentioning this is that seams coordination by both the WEISS operated by SPP and the WEM operated by CAISO has not reared its ugly head to the extent that there have been development of any market-to-market coordination protocols. But as you develop more and more mechanisms that involve collecting congestion revenues and rebating, and people start worrying about the adequacy of their congestion hedging, then having revenue adequacy on that hedge is going to be important. And the assumptions that are made with respect to external loop flow contributions can materially result in either over collection or under collection of congestion revenues. And it wasn't entertained as part of the dialogue yesterday, but I just encourage the WEM board to keep their eye on the process that's developed by CAISO and ensure that assumptions like that are validated in some way through coordination with neighboring non-market participants. So I'll shut up. Thanks for entertaining my long-winded comments.
Steve, let me just say, always good to hear from you. And for those who are not familiar with Steve, Steve was a founding force in getting an energy imbalance market started. And I can't even tell you how many years he pushed this concept and helped to make it a reality. So, Steve, we thank you for all your efforts and your comments today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
With that, there are no further comments in the queue at this time.
Okay. I have a feeling that maybe a lot of comments came out yesterday.
Can I just say that I just want to reinforce our commitment to making this transition from traditional oat to a marketplace as smooth as possible, and that's why I think we're taking up this initiative and trying to find that path forward. So thank you, and thank you to our team.
Art, agreed. Like I said, there's nothing simple about this, and looking at one, just what's being done is to have this hybrid, and then two, with Pacific Core going first, and things could look different as the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and so on are added. So I think there's a lot of things in play here. So that'll conclude our agenda item 7. So we'll move on to 8, which is the briefing on policy initiatives. And Anna, once again, I'm going to ask you to introduce this subject.
Thank you, Chair Kanzioka. Yes, I'm introducing Becky Robinson, our Director of Market Policy Development, and she'll be giving you the briefing on what's going on the market policy initiatives. Becky?
Thank you, Anna. Good afternoon, Chair Kanzioka, Vice Chair Wagner, and members of the governing body. Next slide, please. So first up, I wanted to highlight, as you just heard from Milos, we are kicking off a new initiative on EDAM congestion revenue allocation, and that is on a bit of an expedited schedule. And we really want to sort of get into that with stakeholders, have some robust engagement and robust feedback, which I think we're well on our way to encouraging those conversations and getting that feedback. But we really hope to focus our efforts on this in the next couple months. And we have a targeted scope, and we'd like to work diligently to bring resolution to those issues quickly, if we can, perhaps by the time we meet next in late May. And so in order to facilitate that, that kind of engagement. We're going to be adjusting some schedules on some other policy initiatives to make some space for stakeholders to devote their attention to this matter. So that's something I'll be revisiting a little bit as we work through the rest of the deck here on each of the individual policy initiatives. But I just wanted to flag that at the outset. And I'll stop at the end of each slide to see if there's any questions. So any questions so far?
No question, but Becky, thank you for making that remark. I was going to find a way to squeeze that in, so I appreciate that.
Of course, thank you. All right, next slide, please. So assistance energy transfer. I think we talked about this item a little bit last time. We are planning to kick this off in April with stakeholders to kick off that discussion. As you know, or as you may recall, we have tariff provisions that currently sunset at the end of this year. And so we want to, have that discussion with stakeholders of should we extend it? Let's extend it. But to get that buy-in and to assess, are there other things that people are saying, to have that conversation. But so that will be later in April. We had actually shifted it out a little bit in light of the other new initiative, but we want to get that going. And so we'll have some analysis to review there. I think some of that has also recently been shared in the Market Performance and Planning Forum that was held last week. But we, as I said, we are going to, be listening if stakeholders have other things in the resource efficiency evaluation space that they would like us to work on. But we will be trying to focus and target, re-upping, for lack of a better word, that assistance energy transfer functionality, assuming that stakeholders would like us to do so. So we'll be focusing on that first, and then can consider anything, if there's desire to do so, related to resource efficiency evaluation later on this year. Any questions there?
Becky, this is Rob. I think this is a pretty simple one. Member Decker generally asked this question at a previous meeting. Have you received any feedback from any of the participants that don't believe that we should continue with this? We've heard from a number of participants talking about the value of this, and I'm just curious if you've received any feedback from anybody that would indicate it shouldn't be retained.
No, I don't think we have. So I think that's a great point. I think we do just want to, to have that public conversation, just to kind of confirm that folks don't see sort of small tweaks that they might like to ask for, that sort of thing. But no, I think overwhelmingly we hear, that there's value in the program, and that folks, would continue to see that value, and so that we should renew it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Decker.
Well, thank you, Chairman Conzioka.
Please go ahead.
I think the point here, I think when I saw this show up again this month, I think our comments were that there wasn't a reason to go and do this, and yet you're going to move ahead and do it. So I'm not sure that our feedback to you got through.
I'm sorry, this is Anna. Just wanted to make sure I understood that, Member Decker. Are you suggesting that we're not going to consider whether or not to extend the AET, or are you referring to the sort of additional scope with regards to the resource sufficiency evaluation enhancements?
I think in terms of the energy assistance itself, that seems to be working, and there's so much on you guys. I think the feedback last month was there's so much on you guys' plate that it seems like there's room to say, we're going to set this aside for right now, versus kick this off when there's so much going on. Our stakeholders are really focusing on things that are much more urgent than this.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify. We have unfortunately an expiration date on the current authority for the assistance energy transfers, which is why we are taking to the stakeholder community the need to extend that or not, as a question because we do have that as an expiration date. So unfortunately, at the end of 2025, we wouldn't have authority to implement it anymore. So we do have to consider what happens after that.
Well, Anna, you and I are going to agree to disagree on this. I realize there's a sunset, but there are ways to address the sunset without kicking off an initiative. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Member Decker, thank you for that feedback. Any other questions on this slide, or I can go to the next? All right, next slide, please. So on price formation enhancements. So as you know, this initiative covers 3 big topics: scarcity pricing, BA level market power mitigation, and fast start pricing. And in this initiative, we've been covering a lot of ground with stakeholders in weekly meetings. And so back to my first slide, as we were sort of looking at the stakeholder calendar over the next several weeks as we're getting this new initiative going, you know, most of the initiatives meet monthly. I should start there. But this one, or sometimes more than that, bi-monthly, but this initiative has been, you know, one that stakeholders have been dedicating a significant amount of time to. And we have covered a lot of ground there. So this is an initiative where we're going to be adjusting schedules, not just this one, but I highlight this one in particular because I think, you know, we were absent the new initiative, we were going to be sort of kicking off a new sprint on fast start pricing for the next several weeks, and then another sprint on scarcity pricing for the next several weeks before we come out with some straw proposals in the May timeframe. I think we are going to kind of huddle up internally and assess what we've covered and where we are with these initiatives on these various topics. And I think more to come here, and we still are working towards those straw proposals. I will just be doing so a little bit more internally rather than sort of in that cadence of weekly stakeholder meetings. So any questions there on price formation enhancements? All right. I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, greenhouse gas coordination. So this working group continues to focus its efforts largely on GHG accounting for state policies that require carbon reduction, but which do not use a price on carbon or a cap and trade system. And so the team, we put out an issue paper in the December timeframe. And the group has been continuing to kind of work forward on straw proposals to really design this accounting and reporting approach. What does that report look like? What all is it taking into account? And so we are working closely with the working group, but also with a subgroup of the working group to really develop that report format and kind of just work through, again, the details of what is needed from a compliance perspective with those state policies. What would it be most helpful for the report to focus in on, that sort of thing. So that is that work is continuing. And this may be something where, you know, even though at bottom it's a report that we would produce after, you know, looking at market results, but this report itself would not be part of the market optimization or would not be a market rule change per se, but there may be some tariff authority needed to outline the funding approach for this type of report from the folks that would be interested in it, So that's just a little bit of a preview in terms of what may be coming in terms of a decisional item later this year, potentially. In other news on this working group, you know, the working group has continued to consider GHG metrics and information to help support compliance with different state, local, and corporate programs. We are now publishing GHG emissions rate, average GHG emissions rates on a monthly basis. And we anticipate that additional metrics and reports may become available as part of moving forward with the accounting and reporting approach in the first bullet. And the initiative has also continued to review the GHG design in both the energy imbalance market as well as what is planned for the EDAM. And with that, I'll pause and see if there's any questions here on GHG coordination.
Certainly none.
All right, next slide, please. Okay, on gas resource management. This is one where we published an issue paper in January. Comprehensive issue paper I was very glad to see that as a representation of all the work that had gone into that working group last year. And we have met since then with stakeholders to discuss that. And we've gotten written comments from stakeholders as well. And we're working on a straw proposal in terms of assessing, what did we hear from those comments? Where is the overlap from, among the commenters in terms of moving forward with areas of focus. And so what we saw in those comments was a desire to focus on a few things. So first, enhancing advisory gas burn information in advance of the day-ahead market. Second, exploring cost recovery during exceptional circumstances. So, weather events, significant weather events, both heat and cold. As well as the third item, ISO coordination with gas pipelines during restrictive operating conditions like OFOs and that kind of thing. So some of these areas, some of these changes in these areas could be simply process enhancements on our side, whereas others may require tariff changes or early in the process. But we see those as kind of key areas of overlap among what we're hearing from a wide variety of stakeholders. So happy to see this item moving forward and hopefully driving to resolution on these issues this year. Any questions on gas resource management?
Becky, I don't have a question on it, but I just want to provide an appreciation on keeping this moving forward. As you're aware, this has kind of a long history now, and it's been a pretty challenging topic to get out in front of, and been a lot of conflicts out there. And it's good to see this moving forward. And I appreciate hearing you say that maybe resolution this year, just because it's something that really does need to be solved. And it's something that vexes a good part of the West.
I appreciate that feedback. Yes, appreciate you highlighting that. Thank you. All right, next slide, please. So congestion revenue rights. Here, again, we kicked off this working group around the turn of the year. I think it was maybe at the end of 2024. The next meeting is actually not today. This was some dated information, but will be April 1st. And we actually have some other ISOs coming to share how they are equivalent FTRs or so forth work in their markets, financial transmission rights. They're equivalent to our congestion revenue rights, which I think will be great in terms of sharing experiences and how they have improved their revenue inadequacy, or the sort of how the market is working and how how they have any changes they've made in recent years as other markets have sort of addressed similar challenges in this space. But so far, the working group, it's still in a fairly early stage. They've discussed, scoping the initiative, the current program structure that we have, its function, how it's working for stakeholders, market participants. And the working group has also reviewed a comprehensive analysis of that we've done following on from the 2018 last batch of reforms to the congestion revenue rights market. And we've had 2 recent meetings to go through that analysis, sort of a root cause analysis of what's going on and why, and sort of digging into the data. And so that's been, I think, really informative. And again, just as a reminder, this initiative and that analysis is really kind of delivering on our commitment that we made when we did the last batch of reforms in 2018. that were designed to resolve some of the observed inefficiencies with the CRR auction. So at that time, we had committed to assess the impacts of the proposals after we'd put those changes in place, and to consider more comprehensive changes to CRR allocation and auction if needed. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions on this item. All right, I think we can go to the next slide then. So demand and distributed energy market integration. This is another new working group that we've kicked off this year. It's covering a lot of ground. It is exploring developing or enhancing participation models and market rules associated with demand response and distributed energy resource participation. Kicked off in February. It's been meeting about monthly, and we're working on a discussion paper to kind of organize stakeholder feedback on various topics within this space and assist with some initial prioritization of what we should tackle first, and how to just organize the various issues that are surfacing in this space where we know there's a lot of attention, a lot of interest. And so look forward to getting into that more this year. Any questions on this item? All right, next slide, please. Storage design and modeling. This is again a new initiative, but continuing the work on storage issues. After we brought you and the Board of Governors the storage bid cost recovery item towards the end of last year. So again, this initiative has been meeting about monthly, digging into a lot of different topics. Again, this date is now wrong. We did have a storage meeting on the calendar for April 2nd, but we opted to cancel that one in light of the need to make a little room on the stakeholder calendar. So this initiative will be meeting later in April. And so they're actually working now on a paper, so that works out just fine. To have a little less time on the stakeholder calendar. But what this initiative has been covering, again, a lot of topics in this space. So they've done some level setting on storage constraints in the market, both existing constraints as well as planned constraints, such as with the rollout of the day-ahead market enhancements and some of the storage-related aspects of that. As well as sort of digging into and elucidating the use of implied bid spreads in the market optimization. And we've also had some stakeholders come and give presentations on items of interest to them. So we had TerraGen, Pacific Gas and Electric, and Vistra all come and present on various issues, such as related to hybrid resources. So storage paired with another facility and following a single dispatch signal. Novel participation pathways in terms of what product storage resources are providing to the grid, to the market, as well as outage management topics. And so the team, as I mentioned before, is now working on an issue paper and straw proposal on a kind of a subset of topics that we identified as able to move forward sooner, and where there's some value in providing some clarity at this time, sort of related in where there's some operational interactions. And so these topics that this issue paper and straw proposal, which is probably going to be released later this week, will cover, include things like outage management system enhancements and clarifications about like what nature of work should you use related to different storage phenomenon happening to your resource. Things like state of charge definition, and as well as a feature of storage resources called non-linearity or fold back, which is, relates to when you're at the top or bottom of your state of charge range and how your ramp rate is very different. It slows down as you get sort of to the edge of your state of charge range. So again, some sort of developing some general shared understanding and clarity around those types of issues, which will be really, I think, helpful to market participants to have a clear understanding of what's expected of them in terms of reporting, sharing information with us, as well as to our operations folks, so that they can better understand and estimate what is the what is the capability of the storage fleet? Any questions there?
Andy?
Thanks, Becky. Yeah, so of course, energy storage continues to be a high growth asset class across the West. It's maybe too early to answer this question, but I guess taking it up a level, well, I look forward to learning about nonlinearity. But before then, taking it up a level, I guess what are you kind of seeing as emerging as like the big either goals or problems to solve, or around energy storage? Is that kind of emerging yet? I mean, these issues sound very technical, which I know that with storage, the technical is where the action is, but wonder if you might be able to kind of characterize the bigger picture goals of this initiative yet.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would say it is a little early, but a couple of things come to mind. One is related to just fundamentally, how do storage resources participate in the market and represent their capability in the market, given that this holds sort of limited, I have only limited state of charge. That's a unique feature of storage resources. So one of the sort of bigger ticket items in the list of many topics that this initiative hopes to cover is state of charge bidding, which, if you think of it, most resources, well, all resources, including storage resources today, they just sort of bid to say, they bid based on output, right? So the fact that you can produce 100 megawatts at a given point in time is sort of the dispatch award and how your bid is, how you think about your bid. Whereas there is a potential market participation pathway, if you will, that we have not ironed out yet, but that has been a little bit in the works for a while and has been kicking around in people's heads, thinking about, oh, is this a better way for storage to participate in the market? Might be related to bidding based on their state of charge instead. So you see sort of the total 400 megawatt hours, of a 4-hour, 100 megawatt battery. So that then you can sort of, I think folks have identified that bidding, that way of bidding should be different than today, could help address some other issues, variety of different issues. I don't want to go into those here, but I just raised that one because I think it is, as you highlighted, as we continue to see storage grow on the grid and have more and more of it, sort of how it is participating, how it's showing up is becoming increasingly important. And so that item, as well as just, I think we have committed to revisit the bid cost recovery item that we brought to you all in November last year to kind of think more comprehensively around that. That didn't, we thought that it was worthwhile to move forward with these sort of more technical issues first, just to establish some clarity again around those. But we are committed to continuing those conversations as well, which I kind of think, again, get to a little bit of the fundamentals of how are storage resources being dispatched, being compensated, and in their markets generally. So certainly want to tackle those issues, and I think it's valuable to. Your question is valuable in terms of helping steer our work there and making sure that we are focused on the big goals and what are the big problems to solve. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. If there's no other questions on storage, I think we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so our policy initiatives catalog and roadmap. And so now we are in 2025. We have kicked off the 2025 process here. So stakeholders have submitted already their ideas for discretionary policy initiatives proposals during the month of February. And we are working on, we've got a stakeholder prioritization workshop coming up April 2nd, which is going to feed into the Regional Issues Forum roundtable on April 9th. As I think was mentioned earlier in the RIF update. And we'd like to use this prioritization workshop, as it's intended to sort of think about going forward in 2026, what should the work next year look like? But as well, given that we are seeing the need to do some prioritization now, and in terms of the near and midterm for even, later this year, we'd like to get stakeholder feedback on, if they, according to their view, are there initiatives that we should pause or slow down versus other ones that we shouldn't, right? That should continue at their current pace. And so we might be trying something different this year in terms of asking stakeholders to prioritize not just among the new ideas, but to kind of look at the new ideas as well as the existing initiatives and prioritize all of that together, to give us feedback on of the existing initiatives. We're doing some ad hoc choices now in terms of making some room on the stakeholder calendar, but so that we make sure we have a sustainable calendar and, scope of work for the rest of 2025 to get some input on, is it too much? If so, what can slow down? What should we, and how should we think about the various initiatives we have going and how to make some room there. Any questions there? All right, not seeing any. I think this is my last substantive slide to walk through. But can we go forward so that we just hit the other slides? Right, so here we've got our informational updates for ongoing policy initiatives not under joint authority. And then if we could go forward, so here you see our slide on resource adequacy policy development. And then if we can go forward, unless there's any questions on any of this, here's our policy initiative process. And then I think my final slide is, if we could go forward one more. Yes, here's our graphic of, we got them all on one page this time. So hopefully it's still readable. But this is all of the policy initiatives that we have going at the moment and sort of where they are in their phase. So I'll stop again to see if there's any final questions.
Nikki, I'm not seeing any, and so let me ask if you're ready for me to go to public comment. All right. Silas, can we see if anyone is expressing interest in making public comments?
If you'd like to make a public comment, you can please press the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or #2 if you are dialed in through the phone only line. At this time, I'm not seeing any hands up in the comment queue.
Silas, thank you very much. Governing body members, on agenda item number 9, informational reports. Are there any questions for staff on any of these reports? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item 10, which is our future agenda items. Anything that needs to be noted here at this point in time? Okay, seeing none. Before we conclude, I'd just like to remark that as I listened to the presentations by Mike and Natalia, Milos, and Becky, and the comments by Anna, I noticed some themes in here, and it had to do with transparency and openness, responsiveness, and flexibility. And I would like to just remark that these are really strong attributes to have to meeting the needs of the energy markets. And I think that it will serve everybody well to make certain that as we move forward, and we're always in this learning mode and adapting. So thank you everyone for your attendance today and paying attention. And this concludes our meeting, and see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, governing body members.